My husband threw himself a birthday party and invited 60 people. He rented a private room at the restaurant where we had our first date. He ordered a custom cake. He put together a playlist that took him 3 evenings to build, which I know because I watched him do it at the kitchen table while I sat across from him reading and said nothing. He invited her too. Her name was Melissa. She was 31, 7 years younger than me, and she worked in his office in a role that had been described to me. On the one occasion, her name had come up in our house as administrative. She had been at the company for 8 months. I had known about Melissa for 3 weeks before the party. I found out the way people find out these things in the modern age. Not through intuition, not through lipstick on a collar, not through any of the cinematic signals that affairs are supposed to announce themselves with. I found out because his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower, and the screen lit up with a preview of a message, and the preview was enough. I picked up the phone. I read the last 2 weeks of their conversation. Then I put the phone back exactly where it had been, face down, and I went and finished making dinner. He came downstairs 20 minutes later and kissed me on the cheek and said it smelled good. I said thank you. 3 weeks is not a long time, but it is long enough if you use it correctly. I used it correctly. The first thing I did was call my sister, who is an attorney, not a divorce attorney, a corporate attorney, but someone who knew enough to point me in the right direction immediately. She told me what to document and how to document it. She told me not to move money yet. She told me to find a divorce attorney before I did anything visible. I found one within 48 hours. Her name was Patricia, and she was calm and methodical, and she told me the same thing my sister had told me. Document, wait, do not change your behavior. I documented, I waited. I did not change my behavior. I also made a decision about the birthday party. The party had been planned for 3 weeks from the discovery. Thomas had been organizing it for over a month, which means he had been planning a celebration of himself while conducting an affair with a woman from his office, which tells you something about the specific quality of his self-regard. 60 guests had been invited. The restaurant had been booked. The deposit had been paid with our joint account, which I noted and sent to Patricia. I had 2 options. Option 1, cancel. Confront him before the party. Have the conversation in private, in our house, in the way that these conversations usually happen, messy and painful and witnessed only by the 2 people involved. Option 2, attend. I chose option 2. Not out of cruelty. I want to be clear about that. Not to humiliate him for the pleasure of it. I chose it because Thomas had spent 3 weeks walking through our life as though everything was normal, sitting across from me at dinner, sleeping beside me at night, kissing me on the cheek in the kitchen, while knowing what he knew. He had made a choice about how to treat me. He had decided I didn't deserve the truth. I decided that the birthday party was a reasonable place to correct that. I also decided that if Melissa was going to be in the room, and I had confirmed, through a detail in one of the messages I had read, that she would be, then she should be there for the correction too. I bought a new dress, red. I made an appointment for my hair. I confirmed my attendance with the restaurant. Then I wrote the toast. The party was on a Saturday in September. 60 people in a private room. Family, colleagues, friends accumulated over 15 years of Thomas's life and 8 years of our marriage. Round tables, good wine, the warm noise of a room full of people who were happy to be there. I arrived with Thomas. We had driven together, which felt, by that point, like a small act of theater. The husband and wife arriving at his birthday party, her hand in his arm, her smile in place. I had been performing normal for 3 weeks. Another 2 hours was not difficult. I identified Melissa within 4 minutes of arriving. She was at a table near the back with a group of colleagues I recognized from Thomas's work events. She was dressed carefully, the way you dress when you are attending the birthday party of a man you are sleeping with, while his wife is also in the room. She did not look at me directly, which told me that she knew exactly who I was. I smiled at her from across the room. She looked away. I found my seat, accepted a glass of champagne, and talked to the people around me with the ease of someone who had nothing on her mind except enjoying the evening. Thomas gave the first toast. He was charming, as he always was in rooms full of people, self-deprecating, warm, grateful. He thanked everyone for coming. He thanked me specifically for being the best partner he could have asked for, which produced a warm sound from the room, and which I received with a smile that I had been practicing for 3 weeks. Then his best friend Marcus gave a toast, then his sister. Then there was a natural pause in the proceedings, the kind of pause that happens at parties when the formal part has ended and the evening is transitioning into something looser. I stood up. The room noticed immediately. Thomas looked at me with an expression that was, I think, genuine warmth. He assumed I was giving a surprise toast for him, which was a reasonable assumption for a man who did not know what I knew or what I had prepared. I picked up my champagne glass. I said, "I hope you'll all indulge me for just a moment. I've been thinking about what to say tonight for a few weeks now, and I want to get it right." The room was warm and attentive, 60 people with their glasses ready. I said, "Thomas, we've been together for 10 years and married for 8. You have been, for most of that time, a man I was proud to be beside. I want to acknowledge that genuinely, and in front of everyone here who has been part of our life." I paused. The room was still warm. Thomas was smiling. I said, "I also want to acknowledge something else. 3 weeks ago, your phone was on the kitchen counter, and it lit up with a message. I read the last 2 weeks of your conversation with Melissa." The room changed. I did not look at Thomas. I looked at the room, at the 60 people who had come to celebrate him, who were now very still and very quiet and watching me with the specific attention of people witnessing something they had not anticipated. I said, "I'm not going to read the messages out loud because some of the people in this room don't deserve to have that in their memory of tonight. But I do want to say this, clearly, in front of everyone here who loves Thomas, and who has also over the years been kind to me." I looked at him then. I said, "I know. I have known for 3 weeks. I have spent those 3 weeks consulting an attorney, documenting everything that needed to be documented, and preparing for a conversation we are going to have with our respective lawyers, rather than in this restaurant." I set my champagne glass down on the table. I said, "I am leaving now. I have arranged my own car. I want to thank everyone here who has been genuinely kind to me over the years. You know who you are, and I am grateful for you." I picked up my bag. I looked at Melissa at her table near the back. She was looking at the table in front of her. I did not address her directly. She was not the point. She was never the point. I looked at Thomas one last time. I said, "Happy birthday, Thomas." Then I walked out of the room. I will tell you what happened in the 60 seconds after I left, because I was told about it later by Marcus, who called me the following week and told me everything in the careful, slightly stunned manner of someone who had witnessed something he was still processing. Thomas did not move for a long moment. Nobody moved. Then someone, Marcus did not know who, started to quietly collect their things. And then someone else did. And within 10 minutes, more than half the room had found reasons to leave. Not dramatically, not with statements, just the quiet, steady departure of people who had come for a birthday party and found themselves at something else entirely and did not know what the correct behavior was except to give the man at the center of it some space. Melissa left within 5 minutes of me. She did not say goodbye to Thomas. Thomas sat at the head of his birthday table for a long time after most of the room had emptied. Marcus stayed. He said Thomas did not say much. He said he looked like a man trying to understand the shape of something that had just changed completely. I was already home by then. I had changed out of the red dress. I had made tea. I had called my sister, who said, "How did it go?" I said, "It went exactly as planned." She said, "Are you okay?" I thought about that question honestly. I said, "I'm better than I expected to be." The divorce took 7 months. Patricia was efficient and thorough. Thomas did not contest much. I think he understood that the position he was in did not lend itself to contest. The settlement was fair. The house was sold and divided. The joint accounts were split. I moved into an apartment that was entirely mine, with my things arranged in my own way, with no one else's schedule in it and no one else's phone on the kitchen counter. I want to tell you something about the apartment, because I think it matters. The first morning I woke up in it, boxes still unpacked, temporary curtains, a coffee maker on the floor because I hadn't found a shelf for it yet. I lay in bed for a while, and I waited for the sadness to arrive. It came. I won't pretend it didn't. 8 years of a marriage is 8 years of a life, and the end of it is a loss regardless of the circumstances that caused it. I felt that loss in the first weeks in that apartment, in the specific quiet of mornings that used to have another person in them. But underneath the sadness was something else, something I hadn't expected and couldn't fully name at first. It took me a few weeks to identify it. It was relief. Not the relief of escape, though there was some of that. The relief of being precisely, exactly, only myself, of not performing anything for anyone, of waking up in the morning with the full quiet of a space that asked nothing of me except to be in it honestly. I had not realized until it was gone how much of my energy in those final years had gone into managing the performance of a marriage that had already, on one side, been abandoned. The relief of not performing that anymore was enormous. People ask me about the party. They always ask about the party. It is the part of the story that people find most satisfying, most cinematic, the part that seems like something from a film rather than a Saturday evening in September in a private dining room that smelled like good wine and birthday cake. They ask, wasn't it terrifying, standing up in front of 60 people and saying what I said? The honest answer is no. By the time I stood up in that room, I had been carrying what I knew for 3 weeks. I had been sitting across from Thomas at dinner, waking up beside him in the morning, performing the ordinary texture of a marriage I already knew was over, all while knowing what I knew and saying nothing. That had been the hard part, the carrying, the silence. Standing up and speaking was not hard. It was a relief. The same relief as the apartment, the same relief as being exactly who I was without performance. After 3 weeks of silence, speaking the truth out loud in a room full of people felt like putting down something very heavy. I had also by that point accepted something that I think is the most important thing I learned in those 3 weeks and in the months that followed. I was not responsible for Thomas's choices. I was not responsible for what he had done or why he had done it, or what it said about how he valued me. Those were his choices, made in his character, and they were not a reflection of my worth. What I was responsible for was what I did with what I knew. And I had decided, in the 3 weeks between the phone on the kitchen counter and the birthday party, that I was going to handle it with the full dignity of someone who knew exactly what she deserved. A woman who knows what she deserves does not beg, does not collapse, does not give the person who betrayed her the satisfaction of her devastation as a final gift. She puts on a red dress. She writes a toast. She walks into the room. And when the moment is right, she speaks. If someone has betrayed your trust, if you are carrying something right now that feels too heavy and too quiet and too much like a secret you didn't ask to keep, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to decide how the story ends, not in anger, not in revenge for its own sake, but in the full, clear, dignified knowledge of what you are worth and what you will and will not accept. You are allowed to walk into the room. You are allowed to speak. You are allowed to put on the red dress. She doesn't stay silent. She doesn't stay broken. She rises. Subscribe. New story every week, and every single one of them ends the same way. She rises. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done? I read every single one.